Unpopular opinion. Godzilla Earth isn't actually good or just wasted. He sucks as much as the rest of the anime trilogy. I read a discussion on Godzilla by I used to be Ras Al Ghul discussion. A lot of the time when the anime movies come up, I usually see people praising its incarnation of Godzilla, even those that shit on the rest of the movies. Now, I can get behind hyping up Big G in all his appearance because it's mother effing Godzilla. Bro's a giant dinosaur that F shits up with his atomic breath and will either be delivering the most soul-crushing terror you've ever felt or having you cheer on as he suplexes another giant creature. But I've decided I'm done towing the line, and I'm just gonna come out and say it. Godzilla Earth isn't a standout of the anime trilogy to me. He's not one of the better parts of the movie. He's not being wasted in the films, at least as he is. He's not a cool new idea for a version of Godzilla. He's just as much of an absolute garbage as the rest of his source material. Let's start with a basic summary. Godzilla Earth is the main version of Godzilla that features in the Netflix/Polygon Pictures anime trilogy of films. This Godzilla has a unique origin as being a plant-like organism, the end result of a natural selection on Earth that has adapted the best traits of many other creatures on Earth through the horizontal gene transfer. To put it another way, he's like the ultimate life form Cars from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, but just naturally came out that way. Is a kaiju instead of a human-looking dude, and has no effective representation of that. Godzilla first appeared in universe in 2030, after humanity had been dealing with decades of kaiju attacks. Godzilla, as Godzilla is wont to do, quickly established himself as the baddest bitch around by systematically annihilating all life he came across, from humanity to the other kaiju. Nothing that anyone threw at him, even when the aliens showed up to try and fail with Mechagodzilla, did anything at all. By 2045, Godzilla had so thoroughly dominated the planet that the United Earth Organization, composed of humanity and the two shitty, weirdly human alien species that showed up, could only try to launch a space colonization project and abandon Earth to Godzilla to survive. Godzilla reigned supreme and spent the next 20,000 years terraforming Earth to become his domain, which included growing to be 300 meters tall, having a random mini-clone be created from the cells of his that split off in the form of Godzilla Phileas, and then other small creatures known as Serum. Now that we've covered the basic history of Godzilla Earth, let's address the elephant in the room, from top to bottom. He's a total fucking loser. Zilla arguably has more going for him than this guy. And I don't mean the Thundercock Geiger Chat animated son there. I'm talking about the shitty CGI one from the movie. First off, there's the design. Godzilla Earth has a new origin, unlike any other Godzilla, as stated above, by being an entirely natural plant-based organism that has evolved to represent the pinnacle of life on Earth. So that's pretty cool, right? You would imagine then that this Godzilla would have a new creative design that would reflect this origin well, while still being recognizably Godzilla, right? Nope. It's just a crappy reskin of MonsterVerse Godzilla. You could tell me that the anime's designs came from one of the best achievement award skins in a video game based off the MonsterVerse, and I would genuinely believe you. At best, The dorsal spines more closely resembles leaves than the irregular dorsal patterns, but man, that shit is weak. What's worse is that the film's concept art shows the designers played around with Godzilla's features to represent different animals as the endpoint of Earth-based life, but decided to go with the most boring option possible. The model from the art style of the trilogy certainly didn't do this guy any favors either. It's insane to me how badly this bungles what should be an easy layup in the medium of animation, where the sky's the limits on what you can be doing, and in a story that gives carte blanche to work with. Godzilla Earth somehow comes out as the most soulless and bland version of itself it could possibly be. Nothing about this design meaningfully expresses to me what this version of G-Man is about whatsoever. Look at the other Ravers. Monsterverse Godzilla looks like what it's supposed to be, a version of Godzilla that naturally existed as a giant prehistoric animal. Shin Godzilla looks like what it's supposed to be, a reinvention of the original concept of a creature terribly burned by radiation. -1 Godzilla looks like what it's supposed to be, a dinosaur that has been forcefully mutated by the atomic bomb and modern updates to the iconic Showa/Heisei design. What's the takeaway from Godzilla Earth? That you shouldn't expect creativity or anything compelling from these movies? What really gets me here is that, while not the exact same, the creators of their trilogy did have a possible inspiration that was sitting right there for them to use. Biollante, one of the most popular kaiju of the franchise. On a visual level, Biolante's two forms almost perfectly represents the origin of this creature and the themes behind it. A rose that has been mutated by Godzilla cells that has become a monstrous creature in its own right, are cautionary tales of what genetic engineering could lead to, just as Godzilla himself was a metaphor for the atomic bomb. Obviously, it would be foolish to just try to replicate Biollante, but the point is that we've already seen how well a plant kaiju can potentially work out in this very franchise. Yet apparently, that's too tall of an order for the anime trilogy, I guess. Then there's how Godzilla Earth actually interacts with the worlds around it. Again, in the medium of the animation, many of the normal potential issues with making a movie or series with Godzilla go away. You don't need to worry about about the stilted or artificial nature of the suit movement, nor do you need to worry about how the CGI will come out in live action. The balls have been removed from your jaws to go to your court for you to dunk as you please. But as usual, the anime trilogy that goes down the most painful route possibly by having Godzilla Earth just fucking stand there the whole time. I'm not fucking around here. The SpongeBob meme is entirely an accurate description of the range of Godzilla's Earth's movement. This bitch spends almost all of his screen time just sitting on his ass, barely moving around, with the slightest waddle whenever the film decides there should be a poetry effort at action or to break up the terrible plot. I have seen more newborn infants with more well-defined and fast-paced range of motion than this colossal tub of dirt. Godzilla Earth Godzilla Earth could never touch any version of Kong solely by how they be tap dancing around him like nobody's business and take all the time they'd like climbing on him and taking pot shots without fear of reprisal. It's most blatant when the final film is insulting the collective intelligence of the audience by pretending Godzilla and Ghidorah are fighting. When Ghidorah's swarmy little heads are biting Godzilla, and Big G is just floating in the air like he's a stiff action figure being held up by a toddler while releasing the mild groans of discomfort of a middle-aged father on the verge of developing IBS. I'm not saying the guy needs to have the acrobatic agility of the Showa era or the power walk of Heisei's, but come the fuck on. Give us something to work with here. To give comparisons. MV Godzilla's movements are based upon how actual animals like bears fight, and as well of the GXK wrestlers, reflecting its origin as a gigantic animal that's part of the ecosystem of the world like any other. Shin Godzilla is awkwardly shuffling around and colliding with shit in its path, still more dynamically than Earth, by the way, because it's a creature in a state of constant mutation and pain with no real awareness of the world around it. Minus One Godzilla is deliberately seeking to cause as much damage to the humans, and forced to be much more stiff from its radioactive burns compared to the natural movement we saw on Odo Island. But Godzilla Earth clearly was made on a shoestring budget by the digital artist suffering under the cruel hand of a Ellen DeGeneres-esque directors. It also doesn't help that this dude has pretty much nothing going for him in terms of actual showings. Now sure, a lot of the abilities Godzilla Earth has sounds impressive on paper, being the tallest Godzilla by far, basically having his own AT field with some electromagnetism thing, an incredibly powerful and precise atomic breath that can punch through the atmosphere, charging up a roar that can generate a massive shockwave cone, creating a plasma shockwave simply by moving his cells at Mach 3-4 speed with a 600-meter range. Even his own self-generative burning mode that can go up to 3000 degrees Celsius. All of that sounds pretty cool, right? But from the combination of how utterly immobile Godzilla Earth himself is, the lack of any compelling action sequences, and the exceptionally poor writing of the trilogy, all of that goes to waste. Godzilla Earth spends the majority of his screen time doing absolutely nothing at all, and otherwise performing what ability he has that required him to be non-sedentary. Hint, not many. At a glacial speed. It's not like that glacial speed is one of the example of giving the kaiju a sense of scale and weight either. The fucker is just a goddamn steamroller. Nothing Godzilla Earth does feels like it has any real weight or power behind it. Both because the story is so weak, and the kaiju himself just is doing all but fuck. Aw. Look at how Godzilla moves around Japan in the original movie, Shin or Minus, and how terrifying and awesome all of that destruction is. Because even if those are much smaller Godzillas that are constrained by the live action medium for that time, they still feel much more powerful and dynamic because the movie actually lets them be doing shit. Or in Heisei, Millennium, and Monsterverse, where Godzilla is beating the shit out of other monsters again, much smaller and limited by their medium, but they feel far more powerful because they're in a movie that was made to actually give them a sense of power and might. The closest Godzilla Earth gets to any kind of real display of power like its other incarnation is at the end of the first movie, where the humans are realizing Godzilla Phileas was a branch off from the original. Here, we see him decimating the surviving force as they try to escape, displaying an incredible degree of power in his destruction as the biggest Godzilla yet, with Haru impotently screaming like the little bitch he is. Yet, even that barely compares to the other action sequences in the franchise, because A, nobody gives a single fuck about these characters to feel anything for being attacked. B, Godzilla Earth himself basically came out of nowhere with little to no foreshadowing, as the movie has framed Godzilla Phileas as the true Godzilla the whole time. C, The setting is just a bunch of fauna that Big G is towering over, which limits the ability to convey the power behind his action compared to the cities. And D, all of the above point regarding how lame Godzilla Earth is, I've been talking about. Then, then you remember this is the best showing the guy gets in this nihilistic edge piece of a trilogy, and you realize it's all just a deeper and deeper wellspring of shit. Doesn't help that this scene, well, just has some wannabe Death Note choral music instead of the proper Godzilla feel. So yeah, Godzilla Earth is a total loser from the perspective of being a Godzilla, or just a kaiju in general. Now, let's talk about why he sucks in the story. In a hilarious bleak plot of the anime trilogy, Godzilla is framed as some sort of a natural punishment for humanity, as a natural blowback to all the shitty things humans have done to the planets and each other. It's suggested that this happens to all civilization one way or another, with the albino human aliens having Ghidorah as the versions, and the dark-skinned human aliens having, well, it's never actually said, since the films are totally uninteresting in any meaningful way. But Mechagodzilla seems to be the current one. The only way to survive in the face of these destroyers is to basically give up and accept it and begin worshipping giant moth eggs. Now, there's a lot of pretty blatant problems with this, but let's focus on Godzilla Earth for a moment. If we follow the thematic ideas of him as a form of punishment from the Earth itself towards humanity, it stands to the reason that then there's would be a starting point, right? That this character, who originated as a symbol of the horrors of nuclear weaponry that Japan faced and since evolved to represent different aspects of the darkness that humanity holds, would have an equivalent origin or starting point to his rampage? Well, fuck you if your answer to the above was yes, because that's not what happened. Godzilla Earth, for all intents and purposes of the anime trilogy, is just a random plant that grew up to teabag humanity and take over the world. There's no actual origin given for how Godzilla Earth became what it did, and that actually connects it to being the end result of the waste and folly of humanity that emerged as a part of the natural order of things. Godzilla is just a really fucking big plant in this continuity, and not, a terrible victims of humans' destructive tendencies, like, say, a nuke getting dropped on him. I guess because that would be thematically coherent and fit into the lore of the franchise. Within the trilogy itself, Godzilla serves as pretty much nothing but a plot device for the story to move on at a certain points. While you could argue that this has been a common role for Godzilla in previous films, if you want to use whataboutism, Earth goes the extra step of blatantly existing only for that, given how little he does in the story. The most action Godzilla Earth performs in his story, appearing mid other kaiju and slowly overwhelming them and humanity, happens in the prologue of the first movie as the setup for the trilogy. What could have been a trilogy in its own right, that almost certainly would have actually have something to do, is relegated to the starting point of the series and never comes even close to doing anything comparable. The entire first movie is centered around the humans being focused on his offspring, with no real foreshadowing of Earth himself being around until right before his reveal. The next two movies just have him, again, passively standing around and occasionally lumbering a bit when the movies wants to pretend there's actions going on. The dude literally just waits for when the plot needs him to be doing something. if the human characters actually had something resembling a good stories, or there was there were other monsters around for them to fight in the interim that acted off as as other offshoots of Godzilla Earth, this might not have been such an issue. But as it is, absolutely fucking L of a Godzilla. You can point to the shit like 1998 and all monsters attack as some of the worst showing of for Godzilla there is, and they're still better than Earth by virtue of actually fucking doing stuff. Taking a step further, the thematic narrative around this Godzilla actively falls apart when we properly look at the story of the anime trilogy. Godzilla Earth isn't just some neutral force like in the monsterverse that's just doing his own things without giving a fuck about if the ants below him decided to start shit that ends with them accidentally getting stopped on. The literal premise of the trilogy is that this version of Godzilla already systematically eradicated all the human civilization and every other kaiju around, including the benevolent ones like Mothra. He's only chill in the movies because he succeeded in annihilating nearly all the forms of life a while back. This is an actively malevolent, malevolent force that succeeded in destroying everything around it and terraformed the planet so that it was the source of all life. Even the Mothra tribe has to just hide out and can never actually advance or grow as a civilization beyond being a vaguely orientalist stereotypes of cave dwellers whose women still are conveniently attractive waifu even after 20,000 years of evolving to be moth hybrids without risking Godzilla Earth killing them. Yet, I'm supposed to believe that the humans wanting to come back and live on Earth against are in the wrong? Now sure, Haru Haru being in the wrong I can buy because he's a selfish douchebag obsessed with himself and completely unable to move on from anything at all. But the rest of humanity? They can't actually want to come back to the home planet that many of them spent most of their lives on, wants to get revenge and kill the creature that forced them away as it destroyed everything, or even just want to use the technology instead of worshipping Moth. You can't simultaneously have Godzilla having completely destroyed humanity and all life on the earth that's not him, and is willing to do so again. Have him be taking care of a planet wiping threat as the humans reluctantly assist him, and then be this neutral force representing the earth itself as it changes and evolves. To quote a guy I know who basically summarized the plot of the movies, I think the Godzilla Earth movies kind of play out like a movie deep in the Texan wilderness where a fat redneck with, with, with an enormous shotgun has shot up a whole town and the survivors came back to avenge their parents. But then they have to fight Silicon Valley's people looking to demolish the town to build like a big swimming pool, and then religious extremists, and they needed to save the redneck so that he can do it. I can't think of any other Godzillas that has actively encouraged the audience to think humanity is wrong to not want to be destroyed by a giant radioactive dinosaur or live in fears of it. Even in the films that most directly paint Godzilla as the consequences of the actions of the humans, the message is always one of self-awareness and learning to be better, not just rolling over to get destroyed or giving up on all of civilization as you know it to live in case. Why the hell should I give a shit about what's going on here exactly? To sum it up, Godzilla Earth is just as much of a dumpster fire as the movies he's in. His design sucks ass. His movement and sense of scales are as lifeless as possible. His powers are presented in the most boring ways unimaginable, and his size is validation for people who think Godzilla should only be 50-80 meters at max. Any thematic value or message that he's supposed to have is completely at back with the stories he's given and placed in. This dude isn't the bright spot or redeeming feature. He's just as much of a disappointing piece of trash as everything around him. Too long didn't read. Zilla might have lost the battle for live-action Godzillas, but his son won the war in the animation front of the franchise. Holy shit.